Good day, Grangers.
Welcome to the hall.
I'm Philip Vonada,
And I am Meagan McDonald.
and this is our preview episode, trailer episode of the Grange Hall podcast.
Yeah, we just want to kind of give you an overview of who we are and what the podcast is really all about. And we figured it would just be easier to do in a short little snip rather than try and lead that in with all the other podcasts that we're gonna be able to present to you guys here pretty soon.
I mean, the couple that we already have in the bag, we do talk about ourselves a little bit and our history. But Megan, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, okay.
Well, but I mean, you're the newbie here.
I
Uh,
am the newbie.
I mean, the podcast was kind of your idea. So,
Oh, okay. Well, so okay, we'll start with me. So I just let's back up a little bit. I do have another podcast. So that's kind of how this came about because I was like, look, like it's such a good way to get information out into the public eye. Like I love a podcast. Like, I'm a podcast fan. I like to listen to podcasts, whatever, whatever. So I was like, why are we not doing a Grange podcast? Like that's what I said to Phil. So I am almost brand new Grange member. I've been part of the Grange, about a year and a half, going on a couple of years now. And the way that I was introduced to Grange is my neighborhood watch, which is like some moms like in my neighborhood. Basically, we all get together and do neighborhood watch. We started meeting at the Grange, and I'm like, I don't even know what the Grange is. Like, I had no idea when I walked into the Grange the first time. I'm like, well, this is a beautiful hall that is. It literally sits across the street from my kids' school, which is how like that's kind of the connection is like with the school. And so I started we started doing this neighborhood watch. And the leader of the neighborhood watch was like, we should all join the Grange. And I'm like, okay, wait, what? So my Grange, the Waller Road Grange, number 1111 in Washington State. We actually have gone through a huge revitalization. It was down to just a handful of members, 4 or 5 years ago, and it was pretty dire. They weren't sure that they were going to be able to keep the doors open, and so there was a huge membership drive. And this was before I even joined. There was a huge membership drive to just kind of revitalize it and revamp it. I am in a very suburban. It's a very suburban Grange. It's a very suburban area. It's like literally you could throw a stone and hit like Tacoma, like you know. So it's not, we're not rural, and that's not the flavor of our Grange. But the flavor of our Grange is really more of a community space for organizations to come and do their thing. And we have lots of clubs and stuff that meet, but we're a big rental space. We're one of the less expensive rental spaces in the area, and so there's a lot of things that happen at the Grange. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, retirement parties, that sort of thing that happens on the weekends. And we're rented out most of the year, to be
That's great.
perfectly honest. Like, it's funny when we do Grange events, it's like, look at the calendar, like when can we slide in our own events because we have the Grange rented out so much, which is it's a great problem to
Hmm.
have. So yeah, so when I decided to join I went to a couple of meetings, and this is kind of the why it's kind of laughable now. I went to a couple of meetings and I'm like, okay, whoa, because I saw all of the ritual. And
Mhm.
it was abbreviated. It's not the full version that some Granges do, but there was part of the ritual. And I'd never been part of a fraternal organization before. I'd never seen this. Like, I'd heard about it obviously, but I'd never seen it in action before. And I was like, okay, like I jokingly said, like, what am I pledging my allegiance to when I do all these things? Like, what is this? What is this? And the more I learned and kind of dug in and understood that this is really just about community and how do we support our community in the best way. That's kind of when I went all in. So that I decided to join at that point because there's a connection. We actually have the historic one room schoolhouse building is on our property, the original school for the area. And that connection with my kids' school is really what helped me bridge the gap of like really wanting to get in. And so most of the stuff that we do now, we do some kind of donation drive or something for the school because we really want to keep connected to the school in that way. So yeah, so this past year I was elected the president of my Grange.
Welcome to the
Which,
Grange.
yes, welcome to the Grange. Here, you want to be president? Sure. But I have been, I was able to attend our state Grange convention last year, and then I met Amanda, who is the membership director at the national level, who thought that I would be really great as a communication fellow, which is Phil's program at the national convention. And so I applied and was accepted to the fellowship program, which is kind of how Phil and I hooked up. And so, that's kind of where the podcast, the brainchild of the podcast started, was at national convention. Phil and I started doing, we recorded a few episodes, and so that's where it started. So I
I
don't
think
know.
I challenged the fellows class to like think outside the box and say what's something that we should be doing that we're not doing, and you were like a podcast.
Podcast,
I
yeah.
was like, oh, okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that's, I mean, I guess that's kind of my history with the Grange, which is very short. It's a very short history, and I'm still learning. And I think that that's one of the things that when Phil and I talked about doing this podcast, why we felt like it would be a good combination of him and I, because I have zero knowledge, not zero knowledge now, but I have a very short history, and I'm still learning a lot. And so when I get to talk to people, it's more from a curiosity, inquisitive stance of like, okay, so why are we doing that? What does that mean? Da 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 da. And Phil will talk about himself here in just a second, but like Phil has a very large depth of knowledge, history of the Grange, because he was basically born into the Grange. So
I am a fourth generation Grange member. My niece and nephews are the fifth generation. We got our legacy family award in Niagara Falls here this past November. But I'm a member of two separate Granges. I'm the president of Eagle Grange number one, which is the first Grange in Pennsylvania, and I'm the program director at Penns Valley Grange number 158. And what's interesting is that they are two very different Granges in the way that we function. Eagle has a historic Grange Hall. Penns Valley, we are hallless. We had a building and just recently sold, so we're in this interesting process of figuring out how can we serve our community without having despite the fact that the fire company is like, no, 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 you're going to meet at the fire hall. That's fine. And we're like, okay, thanks. But it's interesting to see how two very old Granges. Eagle celebrated 150 years a couple years ago now, and Penns Valley will be celebrating our 150th anniversary this year. But figuring out the different ways that we serve our communities. And I think that's what I love about the Grange, is that every Grange has its own in to the community and its own connection and its own purpose. And while we're all connected under the umbrella of the Grange and under the same mission, more or less, it's interesting to make it our own. Um, so I was born into the Grange. My mom talks about I attended my first Pomona meeting when I was 3 weeks old and was able to lay across the lap of the chaplain, um, who is
Pomona is the term that we use for the county
county
level
level.
of
Yes,
Grange. So just for
county or
things,
region level now.
yeah, vocabulary check.
Yes. This is Megan's
Terminology.
purpose on the podcast, is
Yep,
that when our guests or myself get too into deep,
Grangey, too Grangey.
too grangey, she goes, now what does that mean?
Yes,
And I love that because
yep,
I'm so used to the terms and I've been in for so long that every once in a while I'm like, oh, people don't always understand our jargon, don't understand our language.
yeah.
So that's great. And I appreciate somebody coming in and challenging my own knowledge as well. It's not,
Not a challenge. I don't want to call it a challenge. It's more just like I said, like I think I come at this from curiosity and
oh
in
yeah,
an inquisitive perspective of like, okay, so what does this mean? Or, like again, like I know what Pomona means, obviously, because
right.
of my involvement now, but like in my mind, I think, oh, people are not going to know what that means. Like people are going to say Pomona. What is a Pomona? Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I
Right.
interrupted.
No, no, no. Interrupt all you want. That's what a podcast is, right?
That's what I'm here for, right? To
Um,
interrupt.
so yeah, so my goal with this podcast is we are looking to introduce Grangers and non-Grangers alike to some of the interesting movers and shakers around the country.
Yeah.
While we may have some national Grange leaders on from time to time, some of the people that we're looking to introduce you to are just your regular average Granger who's making something happen in their community. Um, So if you guys have our guests out there, our people that are watching or listening, if you have questions for us, shoot them to us. Email grangehallpod@gmail.com, and we'll get going with some questions for Megan or I, or things that you want to know about the Grange we can potentially incorporate into our podcast as we're going. So
Absolutely.
yeah, welcome to the hall. Oh,
Welcome to the hall.
Megan, we should say, why did we pick this name for the podcast?
Oh yeah, why did we pick this name for the podcast? I think that we were really thinking about how do we, because I this is, and this is, my vision is that, like, there needs to be a place that people can come and learn about the Grange that is not what am I
Not a
trying to say
convention,
with,
it's not a session, it's not a
it's not even a
physical.
Grange Hall.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
mean, in reality, like, this isn't, even though we're calling it the Grange Hall, it's not even,
The
like, it's an
virtual.
open forum. It's an
Yeah.
open forum, and it's hopefully that there's not it's an intimidation factor, because I remember my first Grange meeting, it was like, oh my gosh, like, what is all this? Like, I don't know what this is. Like, and I'm a very, obviously, like, assertive individual, and I don't get, like, I'll be like, okay, it's weird, but I'm going to stick this out and see what's going on. But I know a lot of people that won't, and I've seen that happen in my own personal Grange. People be like, I'm never coming back because I don't understand this. And so I want people to be able to have an introduction to Grange. I want Grangers, I want people who are longtime
Mhm.
Grangers to come to this and learn from one another. Cause, like, that's another thing that we talked about. Like, we can learn, we can get ideas from one another. Like, this is a place for Grangers, yes, but it's also a place for people who have no idea, who might just be curious about what Grange is, just to understand what this organization is and what this organization does. Because if you've never had an introduction to it, like me before, which is, interestingly enough, because I found out that my grandfather was actually president of a Grange in Maryland, and I had no idea. And my dad told me after I became the president of the Grange. I'm like, Dad, why would you not tell me that? He's like, well, I just thought of it. And I'm like, okay. So anyway, long story short, yeah, like, it's that the point of this is to highlight things that are going on in local Granges, because that's really the heart and soul of the Grange, right?
Mhm.
Like, the heart and soul of our Grange is these local Granges, and they are flavored to their community. So we are serving our community where our communities are at. So, like, my Grange, it's a suburban Grange, is doing suburban Grange things. Whereas, like, a rural Grange might be doing more things that are focused towards, the rural community, which is it, and that's amazing
Absolutely.
that we can do that and have the flexibility to do that, because nobody's saying at the national level, this is what you have to do. They're saying, go serve your community in the best way to serve your community. And we've done an interview that I think is really interesting. A Grange that formed out of a community garden.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that was, I mean, like, mind blown. Like, I had no idea. Like, the whole
They had their
Grange
purpose
came.
before they had their Grange.
Yes, the whole Grange came out of an idea for a community garden. It's like, yes, this is what Grange is all about. You see a need, you fill a need. How do we be that for our community? And I think that that's why we that's why we did this. And the Grange Hall, we're calling it the Grange Hall because it really is a gathering place, for these ideas,
And for a
this
lot
meeting
of
of the
people
minds.
who learn about the Grange or who come to the Grange, it's because they say, we've seen the Grange Hall along the side of the road, or we've seen these buildings as we're traveling. And while we're not a building, we're still the place where we want to gather our community together to learn and to, have some laughs too, because neither Megan or I are very serious people sometimes. So
What? No, just kidding.
so welcome to the Grange Hall, everybody, and we'll see
Yeah.
you next time.
We will. We'll see ya. Enjoy. Come back and listen as often as you can.
Yes. Hopefully every other week. We're gonna make
That's
this
right.
happen.
We're
So
gonna make it. We're gonna make it happen. We're gonna make it happen, guys.
we'll see you next time at the
Okay, at
hall.
the hall.